Rebecca Martinez had everything a woman could want. She lived in a beautiful house on Maple Street in the small town of Millfield, Ohio. The house had white walls, a red door, and flowers in the front yard. Rebecca was 34 years old and worked as a real estate agent. She was very good at her job and helped many families find their dream homes. Rebecca was married to David Martinez. They had been married for 12 years. David worked at the car factory in town. He left for work every morning at 7 and came home at 6 in the evening. They had 2 children together. Emma was 9 years old and loved to play soccer. Tyler was 7 and played baseball. Rebecca never missed their games. Every weekend, Rebecca went to the animal shelter to help the dogs and cats. She brought them food and played with them. The other volunteers loved Rebecca because she always smiled and helped everyone. She also baked cookies for the school fundraisers and organized birthday parties for the neighborhood kids. On Tuesday nights, Rebecca met with her book club. On Thursday evenings, she had dinner with her best friend Jennifer Walsh. Jennifer also worked in real estate, and they were business partners. They had started their own company 2 years ago called Martinez and Walsh Real Estate. Their office was on Main Street, and they had a sign with their names in big letters. Rebecca's life looked perfect from the outside. She drove a nice car and wore pretty clothes. She posted photos on social media of family vacations and happy moments. Her friends thought she was lucky to have such a wonderful life. Her sister Monica lived in the next town and visited every Sunday for dinner. But on October 15, 2019, everything changed. That Tuesday started like any other day. Rebecca woke up at 6 in the morning and made coffee. She helped Emma and Tyler get ready for school and packed their lunches. David kissed her goodbye and left for work. Rebecca dropped the kids at school and drove to her office. Jennifer was already at the office when Rebecca arrived. They had 3 appointments that day. The first was with a young couple looking for their first house. The second was with an older man who wanted to sell his farm. The third was with a family moving from another state. Rebecca seemed tired that morning. Jennifer asked if she was okay. Rebecca said she had not slept well. She had been having strange dreams and felt like someone was watching her. Jennifer told her it was probably just stress from work. They had been very busy lately. The first appointment went well. The young couple loved the house on Oak Street and wanted to make an offer. Rebecca was happy because she had been showing them houses for 3 months. The second appointment was more difficult. The old farmer wanted too much money for his land, and Rebecca had to explain that houses were not selling for those prices anymore. During lunch, Rebecca got a phone call. She looked at her phone and frowned. She did not answer it. Jennifer asked who was calling, but Rebecca just shook her head and said it was probably a wrong number. The same number called 2 more times that afternoon. Each time, Rebecca let it go to voicemail. The third appointment of the day was at 4 o'clock. Rebecca showed a house to the family from out of state. They had 2 young children just like Rebecca. She talked to them about the good schools in the area and the safe neighborhoods. The family seemed interested and said they would think about it after work. Rebecca picked up Emma and Tyler from after-school care. Emma had soccer practice, so they drove to the field. Rebecca sat on the bleachers and watched Emma run up and down the field. Tyler played on the playground nearby. This was their normal routine on Tuesday evenings. After soccer practice, they stopped at the grocery store. Rebecca bought food for dinner and snacks for the kids' lunch boxes. Tyler wanted cookies, and Emma asked for juice boxes. Rebecca bought both because she liked to make her children happy. They also picked up dry cleaning and went to the pharmacy to get medicine for David's back pain. They arrived home at 6:30. David's car was not in the driveway yet. This was normal because sometimes he worked late or stopped to get gas. Rebecca started cooking dinner while the kids did their homework at the kitchen table. She made spaghetti with meat sauce because it was Tyler's favorite. At 7 o'clock, David still was not home. Rebecca called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She was not worried because this happened sometimes when he worked overtime. She fed the children and helped them finish their homework. Emma had math problems, and Tyler needed help reading a story about a dog. At 8 o'clock, Rebecca put the kids in the bathtub. She read them a bedtime story and tucked them into their beds. Emma's room had pink walls and stuffed animals everywhere. Tyler's room had baseball posters and toy cars on his shelves. Rebecca kissed them both goodnight and turned off the lights. Rebecca went downstairs and waited for David. She watched television and folded laundry. She tried calling him again but still got voicemail. By 9:30 she was starting to worry. David always called if he was going to be very late. At 10 o'clock, Rebecca heard a car in the driveway. She looked out the window and saw David getting out of his car. He looked tired and stressed. When he came inside, Rebecca asked where he had been. David said he had to work late because one of the machines broke down. He said his phone battery had died, so he could not call her. David ate the dinner Rebecca had saved for him. They watched the news together and went to bed around 11 o'clock. Rebecca fell asleep quickly because she was tired from the long day. The next morning started the same way. Rebecca made coffee and got the kids ready for school. David left for work at his usual time. Rebecca dropped Emma and Tyler at school and went to her office. She had 4 appointments scheduled and was showing a big house to some wealthy buyers from the city. But Rebecca Martinez would never see her children come home from school again. She would never help with homework or attend another soccer game. That Wednesday, October 16th, would be the last day of her life. By evening, Rebecca Martinez would be dead in her own bedroom, and her husband David would be calling the police to report finding her body. David Martinez drove home from work on Wednesday evening like he did every day. The October air was cold, and the leaves on the trees were turning orange and red. He parked his car in the driveway at exactly 6:15 in the evening. David always came home at the same time because his shift ended at 5:30, and it took him 45 minutes to drive home. As David walked toward his front door, he noticed something strange. The door was open just a little bit. This was not normal, because Rebecca always kept the door locked during the day. David called out Rebecca's name, but nobody answered. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The first thing David saw was Rebecca's purse on the living room floor. Her wallet was open and credit cards were scattered everywhere. Her car keys were lying next to the couch. David's heart started beating fast. He called Rebecca's name again, but the house was completely quiet. David walked through the living room and saw that drawers had been pulled open. Papers were thrown all over the floor. The television was still on, playing a cooking show that Rebecca liked to watch in the afternoons. David noticed that some picture frames had been knocked over, but the television and computer were still there. He climbed the stairs to the second floor, calling for Rebecca and the children. Emma and Tyler were supposed to be home from school by now. David looked in Emma's room first. Her stuffed animals were still on the bed, but her drawers had been opened and clothes were everywhere. Tyler's room looked the same way, with toys scattered on the floor and his baseball cards mixed up. Then David went to his bedroom. The door was halfway open. When he pushed it all the way open, he saw Rebecca lying on the floor next to their bed. She was not moving. There was blood on the carpet around her. David ran to her and shook her shoulder, but she did not respond. Her skin felt cold when he touched her. David grabbed his phone and called 911. His hands were shaking as he dialed the numbers. When the operator answered, David could barely speak. He told her that his wife was hurt and needed help right away. The operator asked him questions, but David was crying and could not think clearly. She told him that police and ambulance were coming. Within 10 minutes, police cars and an ambulance arrived at the Martinez house. The red and blue lights flashed in the darkness. Neighbors came out of their houses to see what was happening. David stood in his front yard, still crying and shaking. Detective Laura Thompson arrived 15 minutes later. She was 45 years old and had been solving murders for 15 years. Detective Thompson was tall with short brown hair and always wore a blue jacket. She was known for being very smart and never giving up on a case. Detective Thompson walked into the house and looked around carefully. She saw the purse on the floor and the scattered papers. She noticed that expensive things like the television and computer were still there, but some jewelry was missing from the bedroom. This seemed strange to her because most robbers would take the expensive electronics first. The medical examiner came to look at Rebecca's body. He was a thin man named Dr. Wilson, who had been doing this job for 20 years. Dr. Wilson examined Rebecca and told Detective Thompson that she had been stabbed multiple times with a sharp knife. He said she had probably died around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Detective Thompson asked David to tell her exactly what happened. David sat on his couch and wiped tears from his eyes. He said he had been at work all day and came home to find the door open. He said he did not know who would want to hurt Rebecca because everyone loved her. Detective Thompson asked David about his children. David said Emma and Tyler were at after-school care until 6 o'clock every day. They would stay there until someone picked them up. Detective Thompson sent a police officer to get the children and take them to David's mother's house. She did not want them to see their home like this. The detective asked David if Rebecca had any enemies or if anyone had been bothering her. David said Rebecca had mentioned getting strange phone calls recently, but he thought they were just sales calls. He said Rebecca had seemed worried about something, but she would not tell him what it was. Detective Thompson talked to the neighbors to see if they had seen or heard anything unusual. Mrs. Johnson lived next door and said she had been home all day but had not heard any screaming or loud noises. Mr. Peterson from across the street said he saw a white car in the driveway around lunchtime, but he thought it was Rebecca's car. The crime scene team came to collect evidence. They took photographs of everything and looked for fingerprints on the doors and windows. They found the murder weapon in the kitchen sink. It was a knife from Rebecca's own kitchen set. The knife had been washed, but there were still small traces of blood on it. Detective Thompson noticed several things that made her suspicious. First, there was no sign that anyone had broken into the house. All the windows were locked from the inside, and the back door was still locked. Second, the person who did this knew exactly where Rebecca kept her jewelry, because they only took specific pieces and left others behind. Third, Rebecca's phone was missing, but her car was still in the garage. Detective Thompson wondered why a robber would take a phone but leave a car. She also wondered why Rebecca would let a stranger into her house in the middle of the day. The detective asked David more questions about his day at work. David said he had been at the car factory from 7 in the morning until 5:30 in the evening. He gave her the names of his co-workers who could prove he was there. Detective Thompson wrote down everything David told her. Dr. Wilson finished examining Rebecca's body and told Detective Thompson that Rebecca had fought back against her attacker. There was skin under her fingernails, which meant she had scratched someone. The killer had probably been hurt during the fight. Detective Thompson looked at David's hands and arms but did not see any scratches. As the evening went on, more police officers came to help with the investigation. They talked to Rebecca's friends and family members to learn more about her life. Everyone said the same thing. Rebecca was a good person who helped others and had no enemies. Detective Thompson stayed at the house until late that night, looking for clues. She knew this was not a simple robbery. Someone had killed Rebecca Martinez on purpose, and she was going to find out who did it and why. The investigation was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Rebecca Martinez was found dead in her bedroom. Detective Laura Thompson worked on the case every day, but she was not finding the answers she needed. She had talked to dozens of people, but nobody could tell her who would want to hurt Rebecca. Detective Thompson decided to look more closely at Rebecca's money situation. She went to the bank where Rebecca and David kept their accounts. The bank manager, Mrs. Brown, showed her all the records from the past year. What Detective Thompson found surprised her very much. The Martinez family was in big trouble with money. They owed $40,000 on credit cards. Their house payment was 3 months behind. Rebecca's real estate business was not making much money, and David's job at the factory did not pay enough to cover all their bills. But the strangest thing was that Rebecca had bought a new life insurance policy just 2 months before she died. The policy would pay David $200,000 if something happened to Rebecca. Detective Thompson thought this was very interesting timing. She also found that David had been taking money from Rebecca's business account without telling her. Over the past 6 months, David had moved $15,000 from the business into his personal account. The bank record showed he had done this in small amounts, so Rebecca might not notice right away. Detective Thompson went back to talk to Jennifer Walsh, Rebecca's business partner. Jennifer was 32 years old with blonde hair and always wore nice clothes. She worked in the office next to Rebecca every day and knew her better than anyone else. Jennifer told Detective Thompson something she had forgotten to mention before. 2 weeks before Rebecca died, Rebecca had seemed very upset about something. She kept checking her business bank account online and making phone calls to the bank. Rebecca had asked Jennifer if she had seen any strange charges on their business credit card. Jennifer also remembered that Rebecca had been getting phone calls that made her angry. Rebecca would step outside to take these calls and would come back looking worried. When Jennifer asked what was wrong, Rebecca said it was just family problems and did not want to talk about it. The detective asked Jennifer about David and Rebecca's marriage. Jennifer said that Rebecca had been unhappy lately but would not say why. Rebecca had stopped wearing her wedding ring about a month before she died. When Jennifer asked about it, Rebecca said the ring was being fixed at the jewelry store. Detective Thompson decided to check this story. She called every jewelry store in town, but none of them had Rebecca's ring. This was another lie that made Detective Thompson more suspicious of David. The detective also learned something interesting from Rebecca's phone company. Rebecca's phone had been used to make several calls on the day she died, even after the medical examiner said she was already dead. Someone had been using Rebecca's phone after killing her. The phone company showed Detective Thompson that these calls were made to the bank and to Rebecca's insurance company. Someone had called to ask questions about Rebecca's life insurance policy just hours after she died. The detective knew that Rebecca could not have made these calls herself. Detective Thompson went back to the car factory where David worked. She talked to his boss, Mr. Garcia, about David's work schedule. Mr. Garcia showed her the time records for the day Rebecca died. The records showed that David had clocked in at 7 in the morning like always. But then Mr. Garcia told her something very important. David had left work during his lunch break at noon and had not come back until 2:30 in the afternoon. This was unusual because David normally ate lunch in the factory cafeteria and never left the building during his shift. David had told Mr. Garcia that he needed to go home because his wife had called about a problem with their water heater. But Detective Thompson knew that Rebecca's phone records showed no calls to the factory that day. David had lied about why he left work. The detective calculated the time it would take to drive from the factory to David's house. It was exactly 30 minutes each way. This meant David had enough time to drive home, kill Rebecca, and drive back to work. The timing matched perfectly with when the medical examiner said Rebecca had died. Detective Thompson also discovered that David had been gambling. She found records showing that he had been going to a casino in the next town every weekend for the past year. The casino records showed that David had lost over $20,000 in 6 months. She learned that David owed money to dangerous people. A man named Tony Ricci had been calling David at home, demanding payment for gambling debts. These were the strange phone calls that Rebecca had been getting. Tony was calling to threaten David, but David was not answering, so Tony was talking to Rebecca instead. Rebecca had found out about David's gambling problem and his debts. She had also discovered that he was stealing money from her business to pay for his gambling. This is why Rebecca had been so upset in the weeks before she died. Detective Thompson talked to Rebecca's sister Monica to learn more about Rebecca's state of mind. Monica said that Rebecca had called her the night before she died. Rebecca was crying and said she had discovered something terrible about David. She said she was going to confront him and might need to talk to a lawyer. Monica told the detective that Rebecca had been scared of David lately. Rebecca said David had been acting strange and getting angry about small things. She said David had been asking questions about her life insurance policy and wanted to know how much money she would leave behind if something happened to her. The detective realized that David had planned to kill his wife for several months. He had increased her life insurance, stolen money from her business, and lied about his whereabouts on the day of the murder. But Detective Thompson still needed more evidence to prove that David was the killer. She decided to set a trap for David, to see if he would reveal more information about his crimes. The detective was getting closer to solving the case, but she needed David to make a mistake that would prove his guilt once and for all. 6 months had passed since Rebecca Martinez was murdered. Detective Laura Thompson had gathered a lot of evidence against David Martinez. but she still did not have enough proof to arrest him. David continued to live in his house with his 2 children and acted like a grieving husband who missed his wife. The people in Millfield felt sorry for David. They brought him food and helped take care of Emma and Tyler. The church organized fundraisers to help David pay for Rebecca's funeral costs. Nobody suspected that David might have killed his own wife, but one person in town was starting to have doubts about David's story. Jennifer Walsh, Rebecca's best friend and business partner, could not stop thinking about the strange things that had happened before Rebecca died. Jennifer had known Rebecca for 8 years. They had started working together when Rebecca first got her real estate license. Jennifer watched Rebecca fall in love with David and marry him. She was there when Emma and Tyler were born. Jennifer knew Rebecca better than anyone else in the world. After Rebecca's funeral, Jennifer had tried to help David by taking care of the real estate business. She looked through all of Rebecca's files and computer records to finish the work Rebecca had started. While doing this, Jennifer discovered things that worried her. Jennifer found emails that Rebecca had written but never sent. In these emails, Rebecca talked about being scared of David and finding out about his gambling problem. One email was written to a divorce lawyer, asking for advice about leaving a husband who had been stealing money. The emails were dated just 3 days before Rebecca died. In the last email, Rebecca wrote that she was going to confront David about the missing money and tell him that she knew about his gambling debts. She said she was afraid of how David would react, but knew she had to protect herself and her children. Jennifer also found a note hidden in Rebecca's desk drawer. The note was in Rebecca's handwriting and said, "David took $15,000 from business account, found casino receipts in his car. He lied about working late. Going to ask him tonight what is going on." This note was dated the day before Rebecca died. Jennifer realized that Rebecca had confronted David about his lies on Tuesday night, and Rebecca was dead by Wednesday afternoon. Jennifer remembered other strange things about David's behavior. At Rebecca's funeral, David had seemed more worried about money than sad about losing his wife. He kept asking Jennifer about the life insurance policy and when the money would be paid. Most widowers would not think about money so soon after losing their spouse. Jennifer also noticed that David had thrown away all of Rebecca's personal belongings very quickly. Within 2 weeks of the funeral, David had donated Rebecca's clothes and jewelry to charity. He painted over the pink walls in Emma's room and got rid of Tyler's baseball posters. It seemed like David wanted to erase all memories of Rebecca from the house. But the thing that bothered Jennifer the most was something David had said at the funeral. He told several people that Rebecca had been acting strange before she died and that he was worried she might hurt herself. Jennifer knew this was not true because Rebecca was planning for the future and trying to protect her children. Jennifer started to wonder if David had killed Rebecca and made it look like a robbery. She remembered that Detective Thompson had said there was no sign of a break-in at the house. She also remembered that only specific pieces of jewelry were stolen, not the most expensive items that a real robber would take. For months, Jennifer kept these thoughts to herself. She did not want to believe that David could kill the mother of his children. She tried to convince herself that David was just grieving in his own way, and that the police would find the real killer. But as time passed, Jennifer became more and more convinced that David was guilty. She watched him at community events and church services. David smiled and laughed with other people like nothing had happened. He started dating a woman from the next town just 4 months after Rebecca's death. Jennifer also noticed that David never talked about finding Rebecca's killer anymore. In the first few weeks after the murder, David had asked Detective Thompson for updates on the investigation, but now David seemed to have forgotten about catching the person who supposedly killed his wife. The breaking point came when Jennifer went to David's house to drop off some business papers. She saw David teaching Tyler how to ride a bicycle in the backyard. Tyler fell off the bike and started crying. Instead of comforting his son, David yelled at Tyler and told him to stop being a baby. Jennifer remembered that Rebecca had always been patient and loving with the children. She would kiss their injuries and tell them everything would be okay. Seeing David be mean to Tyler made Jennifer realize that the children were not safe with their father. That night, Jennifer could not sleep. She kept thinking about Rebecca and the emails she had found. She thought about the note in Rebecca's desk and David's strange behavior since the funeral. Jennifer knew in her heart that David had killed Rebecca, but she was afraid to tell anyone. Jennifer was scared of what might happen if she accused David of murder. She worried that people would not believe her, or that David might hurt her too. But she also knew that Rebecca deserved justice, and that Emma and Tyler deserved to know the truth about what happened to their mother. Jennifer decided that she had to be brave like Rebecca would have wanted her to be. She had to tell Detective Thompson everything she knew, even if it was dangerous. Rebecca had been her best friend, and Jennifer owed it to her memory to make sure David did not get away with murder. The next morning, Jennifer called the police station and asked to speak with Detective Thompson. She said she had important information about Rebecca Martinez's murder case. Jennifer's hands were shaking as she dialed the phone number, but she knew she was doing the right thing. Jennifer had kept quiet for 6 months, but now she was ready to help catch Rebecca's killer. She was the only person who knew enough about Rebecca's life to prove that David was lying. Without Jennifer's help, David might never be caught and Rebecca would never get justice. Jennifer Walsh sat in Detective Thompson's office on a cold April morning. Her hands were shaking as she placed a folder full of papers on the detective's desk. Inside the folder were all the emails, notes, and documents that Jennifer had found while going through Rebecca's files. Detective Thompson opened the folder and began reading. Her eyes grew wide as she saw Rebecca's emails about being afraid of David and wanting to contact a divorce lawyer. The note about David stealing money from the business account was especially important evidence. Jennifer told Detective Thompson everything she had been thinking about for the past 6 months. She explained how David had acted strangely at the funeral and how he had gotten rid of Rebecca's belongings so quickly. She talked about David being mean to his children and starting to date someone new just 4 months after his wife's death. Detective Thompson listened carefully to everything. Jennifer said she had suspected David all along, but she needed someone close to Rebecca to confirm her theories. Jennifer's information was exactly what the detective needed to build a strong case against David. The detective asked Jennifer why she had waited so long to come forward. Jennifer started crying and said she was scared that people would not believe her. She also said she did not want to believe that David could kill Rebecca, because that would mean Emma and Tyler's father was a murderer. Detective Thompson thanked Jennifer for being brave enough to tell the truth. She said Jennifer's information would help catch Rebecca's killer and bring justice for Rebecca and her children. The detective promised to protect Jennifer and make sure David could not hurt her. With Jennifer's evidence, Detective Thompson was able to get a search warrant for David's house and computer. She went to David's house with 4 other police officers on a Thursday morning. David was getting Emma and Tyler ready for school when the police arrived. Detective Thompson showed David the search warrant and told him they needed to look through his house and take his computer. David acted surprised and asked why they were searching his house again. He said he had already helped with the investigation and did not understand what more they wanted. The police officers searched every room in the house while David watched. They found Rebecca's missing cell phone hidden in a box in the basement. David's face turned white when Detective Thompson held up the phone. He said he did not know how it got there and that someone else must have put it in his basement. The computer experts took David's laptop and desktop computer back to the police station. Within 2 hours, they had recovered files that David thought he had deleted forever. The computer showed that David had been researching how to kill someone and make it look like a robbery. David had looked up information about life insurance, policies, and how long someone had to wait before collecting money after a spouse died. He had also searched for articles about murder cases where the killer was never caught. The computer showed that David had done this research for months before Rebecca was killed. Detective Thompson also found evidence that David had been gambling much more than she originally thought. Bank records showed that David had lost over $50,000 in the past year. He owed money to several dangerous people who had been threatening him and his family. The phone records from Rebecca's missing cell phone showed the calls that were made after Rebecca was already dead. Someone had used Rebecca's phone to call her life insurance company and ask about the policy payout. The insurance company had recorded the call, and the voice on the recording sounded like David trying to disguise his voice. Detective Thompson, had enough evidence to arrest David. She went to the car factory where David worked and found him during his lunch break. David was sitting in the cafeteria eating a sandwich when Detective Thompson walked in with two other police officers. David looked up and saw the officers coming toward him. He must have known this day would come because he did not seem surprised. Detective Thompson told David he was under arrest for the murder of his wife, Rebecca Martinez. She read him his rights while putting handcuffs on his wrists. The other workers in the factory stopped eating and stared as David was led away. Some of them had known David for years and could not believe he had killed his wife. Others remembered that David had seemed different after Rebecca died and were not surprised by his arrest. David was taken to the police station and put in a small room with just a table and two chairs. Detective Thompson sat across from him and placed all the evidence on the table. She showed him the computer records, the bank statements, the hidden phone, and Jennifer's folder of documents. For the first hour, David denied everything. He said he had never hurt Rebecca and that someone was trying to frame him for her murder. He claimed that he had no idea how Rebecca's phone ended up in his basement and that someone must have put it there. But as Detective Thompson showed him more evidence, David's story started to fall apart. She showed him the computer searches about murder and insurance fraud. She played the recording of someone using Rebecca's phone to call the insurance company. David could not explain any of these things. Detective Thompson told David that Jennifer had given her all of Rebecca's emails and notes. She showed him the note where Rebecca wrote about finding out about his gambling and stealing money from the business. David's face went pale when he saw Rebecca's handwriting. The detective explained that she knew David had left work early on the day Rebecca died. She had security camera footage from a gas station near his house that showed David's car driving toward his neighborhood at lunchtime. David could not explain why he had lied about staying at work all day. After 3 hours of questioning, David finally broke down and started crying. He said he never meant for Rebecca to die, and that everything had gotten out of control. Detective Thompson turned on a tape recorder and told David that anything he said could be used against him in court. David began to tell the truth about what happened on the day Rebecca died. He said Rebecca had confronted him the night before about the missing money and his gambling debts. Rebecca told him she was going to divorce him and take the children away. David said he went home during lunch to talk to Rebecca and try to convince her not to leave him. But Rebecca was angry and said she had already talked to a lawyer. She threatened to tell everyone about his gambling and stealing money from her business. David said he got scared and angry when Rebecca said she was going to ruin his life. He grabbed a knife from the kitchen and attacked her. After Rebecca was dead, David tried to make it look like a robbery by messing up the house and taking some jewelry. David confessed to using Rebecca's phone to call the insurance company and ask about collecting the money from her life insurance policy. He said he needed the money to pay his gambling debts and thought no one would ever find out what he had done. Detective Thompson had finally gotten the confession she needed. David Martinez had admitted to killing his wife for money and to hide his gambling problem. Now Rebecca's family would know the truth about what happened and David would pay for his crimes. The news of David Martinez's arrest spread quickly through the small town of Millfield. People could not believe that the man they had felt sorry for was actually the one who killed his wife. Many neighbors said they felt foolish for bringing David food and helping with his children after Rebecca died. Detective Thompson called Rebecca's sister Monica to tell her that David had been arrested. Monica started crying when she heard the news. She was sad that her sister was really gone, but she was also relieved that the person who killed Rebecca would finally be punished. Monica had been taking care of Emma and Tyler since David's arrest. The children were confused and scared because they did not understand why their father was in jail. Monica tried to explain in simple words that their father had done something very bad and would not be coming home. The local newspaper wrote a big story about David's arrest. The headline said, "Local man confesses to murdering wife." The story explained how David had killed Rebecca for insurance money and to hide his gambling debts. Many people in town said they never would have suspected David of being capable of murder. Jennifer Walsh was relieved that she had found the courage to come forward with the evidence against David. She knew that Rebecca would have wanted her to tell the truth, even if it was scary. Jennifer continued to run the real estate business and donated part of her profits to help victims of domestic violence. David's trial began 6 months later in the county courthouse. The prosecutor was a woman named Sarah Johnson, who had been putting criminals in prison for 15 years. She promised Rebecca's family that she would make sure David received the punishment he deserved for his terrible crime. David's lawyer tried to argue that David had not planned to kill Rebecca and that he had acted in the heat of the moment when she threatened to leave him. The lawyer said David should be found guilty of a lesser charge because he had not meant to commit murder, but Prosecutor Johnson showed the jury all the evidence that proved David had planned Rebecca's murder for months. She presented the computer searches about murder and insurance fraud. She played the recording of David calling the insurance company after Rebecca was dead. The prosecutor also called Jennifer Walsh to testify about the emails and notes that Rebecca had written before she died. Jennifer told the jury that Rebecca had been afraid of David and was planning to divorce him because of his gambling and stealing. Detective Thompson testified about all the lies David had told during the investigation. She explained how David had claimed to be at work all day, when security cameras showed him near his house during the time Rebecca was killed. The medical examiner testified that Rebecca had been stabbed multiple times and had fought hard against her attacker. He said Rebecca had skin under her fingernails from scratching David during the struggle. DNA tests proved that the skin belonged to David. Monica Rodriguez gave a victim impact statement to the jury. She cried as she talked about how much she missed her sister and how Rebecca's children would grow up without their mother. Monica said David had destroyed their entire family by choosing money over love. The trial lasted for 2 weeks. The jury heard testimony from dozens of witnesses and saw hundreds of pieces of evidence. Everyone who had known Rebecca testified that she was a kind and loving person who did not deserve to die. On the final day of the trial, both lawyers gave their closing arguments. Prosecutor Johnson reminded the jury that David had planned Rebecca's murder, lied to police, and tried to profit from his wife's death by collecting insurance money. David's lawyer made one last attempt to save his client by asking the jury to show mercy. He said David was sorry for what he had done and that sending him to prison for life would not bring Rebecca back. The jury left the courtroom to decide David's fate. They talked for 4 hours about all the evidence they had heard. When they returned, the foreman stood up and announced their decision. They found David Martinez guilty of murder in the first degree. David showed no emotion when he heard the verdict. He stared straight ahead as the judge explained that he would be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This meant David would never be allowed to leave prison and would die behind bars. Before the judge announced the sentence, Rebecca's family was allowed to speak about how David's crime had affected their lives. Monica stood up and looked directly at David as she spoke. Monica said that David had not only killed Rebecca, but he had also destroyed the lives of Emma and Tyler. She said the children would grow up knowing that their father had murdered their mother for money. Monica told David that Rebecca had loved him and trusted him, and he had betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. Emma and Tyler were too young to speak at the trial, but Monica read a letter that Emma had written to her father. In the letter, Emma said she did not understand why her daddy had hurt her mommy. She said she missed her mother every day and wished she could hug her one more time. The judge sentenced David to life in prison without parole. He also ordered David to pay for Rebecca's funeral expenses and give all the insurance money to Emma and Tyler for their college education. After the trial, Monica was interviewed by reporters outside the courthouse. She thanked Detective Thompson and Jennifer Walsh for working so hard to find the truth about Rebecca's death. Monica said she was glad that justice had been served, but nothing could bring her sister back. Jennifer Walsh also spoke to reporters and said she hoped other people would learn from this case. She said that domestic violence and financial abuse often happen behind closed doors, and people need to watch for warning signs that someone they know might be in danger. Detective Thompson was proud that she had solved Rebecca's murder case. She said the case showed how important it is to never give up when investigating a crime, even when the evidence is not immediately clear. The detective dedicated the successful prosecution to Rebecca's memory and to all victims of domestic violence. Emma and Tyler continued to live with their Aunt Monica in a house across town. Monica made sure they got counseling to help them deal With the trauma of losing their mother and learning that their father was a killer, the children were slowly healing, but they would carry the pain of their loss for the rest of their lives. The people of Millfield established a memorial fund in Rebecca's name to help other victims of domestic violence. Every year on the anniversary of Rebecca's death, the community holds a walk to raise money for the fund and to remember a woman who was loved by everyone who knew her. David Martinez sits in a prison cell every day, knowing that he destroyed his family for gambling money and insurance payments that he never got to spend. He will never see his children grow up, graduate from school, or have families of their own. David's selfish choices cost him everything, and now he has the rest of his life to think about what he did to the woman who loved him.